Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something a little different. We're not just going to talk about history, I'm going to try and step into it. It's a small clip for you, but it's the little pat on the back that keeps these late night sessions going, okay? And while you're at it, drop a comment below and tell me what city you re-in and what time it is for you right now. It's thick with the scent of damp earth, wood smoke from 100 charcoal braziers, and a faint, sweet smell of incense drifting from a distant temple. You're standing on a muddy, rutted path on the outskirts of what was then the grand capital, Heian modern-day Kyoto. This is a practice known as ohaguro, and to you, it's bizarre. The central authority of the emperor and his court was weakening. Powerful warrior clans, the samurai, were gaining influence in the provinces, and their ambitions were beginning to clash. The air cools with every step you take, the oppressive humidity of the capital giving way to a crisp, clean mountain breeze that carries the scent of pine and damp moss. It's not one of the grand, opulent temples you might find in the city, sponsored by powerful nobles and gleaming with gold leaf. It's not the temple itself, but a simple, unpainted wooden gate, weathered to a soft, silvery gray. While the aristocrats in the city were obsessed with transient beauty and earthly romance, Myo was dedicated to a rigorous, almost severe form of Buddhism. Kei was a scholar, a poet, and a mystic who famously kept a detailed diary of his dreams for over 30 years, believing them to be a pathway to enlightenment. The sun has almost set, and the sky is a deep, bruised purple. A single paper lantern has been lit near the entrance to one of the halls. Its warm, orange glow, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. It's from within these quiet wooden walls that our mystery will emerge. It's here that someone, surrounded by sacred scriptures in the deep silence of the mountain, took brush to paper and drew something that was the complete opposite of severe and pious, something playful, satirical, and profoundly human. You take a step towards that glowing doorway, ready to see who is inside. He chose this mountain location specifically to get away from the distractions of the material world. It stands almost as a natural part of the forest, flanked by 2 stone lanterns covered in a velvety green coat of moss. As a young man, Myo was so inspired by the stories of the Buddha that he became determined to travel to India. When his patrons and fellow monks prevented him from undertaking the dangerous journey, he didn't just give up. In an act of extreme, almost shocking devotion to prove he was serious about renouncing worldly attachments, he took a knife and sliced off his own right ear. He saw it as a way to sever his ties to the ordinary world and commit himself fully to his faith. So, when you picture the monks of this temple, don't just imagine serene men meditating peacefully. Imagine people with the kind of fierce, unwavering conviction that could lead to such an act. It adds a whole different layer to the quiet atmosphere, doesn't it? As you pass through it, the atmosphere changes again. The main building, the Saikasu-yen, is considered a masterpiece of the era's residential architecture. It's not imposing, but it feels harmonious, as if it grew out of the earth it rests on. This is where Myo lived, studied, and meditated. Kōzan-ji wasn't just a personal retreat. Kei became a center for the Kegon school of Buddhism and housed a vast collection of important texts and artworks Historians still debate the full extent of Kōzan-ji's role in the intricate web of Heian politics. Was it purely a spiritual sanctuary, or did it also function as a safe haven for certain political figures? A place where disillusioned nobles could retreat from a court that was becoming increasingly dangerous. The truth is likely somewhere in between. You've entered a sacred space. The grounds are not meticulously manicured, but have a kind of curated wildness. Maple trees, their leaves just beginning to hint at the coming autumn. Framed views of the sloping hills. A stone water basin fed by a bamboo pipe offers a steady, rhythmic clack and a splash of water sound designed to focus the mind. Kōzan-ji is different. It's known for being more rustic, more austere, a place for serious study and quiet contemplation. Far removed from the political games and poetic contests of the court, its very remoteness is its defining feature. You'd have to want to be here, climbing now, the muscles in your legs beginning to burn with a dull ache. The path is less a road and more a suggestion, marked by stones, worn smooth by centuries of pilgrim sandals. Giant cedar trees, ancient and stoic, tower over you, their dense canopy filtering the last of the daylight into 1,000 shifting beams of gold. It's quiet here. The cacophony of the city, the rattling carts, the distant music, the murmur of 1,000 conversations is gone. It's replaced by the rustle of leaves, the call of a lone bird, and the sound of your own breathing. The refined courtiers in the capital might be composing verses about the autumn moon, but out in the countryside, swords were being sharpened. This slow, simmering tension is what makes this period so fascinating. In fact, historians are still debating the precise moment the Heian period ended and the next, more militaristic Kamakura period began. There was no single dramatic event, no date you can circle on a calendar. It was less of a sudden crash and more of a slow, dissonant fade-out as one way of life gradually gave way to another. The air is filled with both perfume and the distant rumble of change. But here, it was the pinnacle of beauty and a symbol of marital status or aristocratic rank. It's in this strange, beautiful, and slightly anxious world that someone, somewhere, is about to pick up a brush, dip it in ink, and create something utterly rebellious, something that will echo for centuries. But to find them, you have to leave the city behind. Your journey is taking you away from the perfumed silks of the court and up into the cool, quiet mountains that cradled the capital. That's where our real story begins. It was considered far more attractive than bearing a set of plain white teeth, which they thought looked unpleasantly bestial, like an animal's. Many women also shaved out their eyebrows completely and painted on soft, smudgy replacements higher up on their foreheads. It's a powerful reminder that you are a tourist in a very different time. A place where your own standards of beauty are completely irrelevant. There are no skyscrapers, no neon signs, just a sprawling landscape of low, dark timbered buildings with elegantly curved roofs. Night is falling, and the city isn't illuminated by a grid of electric lights, but by the soft, flickering glow of individual oil lamps and paper lanterns, casting long, dancing shadows that make the world feel alive and mysterious. It's always fascinating to see where everyone is tuning in from across the globe. Two court ladies, their faces powdered a stark white, shift pounced in layers of exquisite silk robes, whispering behind their fans. They move with a grace that seems almost rehearsed. This is the heart of the Heian period's defining cultural feature, a hyper-focus on aesthetics and refinement, least among the nobility. This was the era that produced the tale of Genji, often called the world's first novel, a sprawling epic about courtly romance and intrigue. For the aristocrats living in the capital, life was an art form. Every detail mattered: the color combination of your robes, the quality of your calligraphy, the subtlety of the perfume you wore. We're traveling back in time, about 850 years to 12th century Japan. The destination is the late Heian period, a world so alien to ours that, honestly, you'd probably have a hard time surviving the first day. Forget Wi-Fi and smartphones. Think unpaved roads, paper walls, and a social etiquette so complex it makes modern corporate meetings look like a casual backyard barbecue. This was a world of refined aristocrats and rising warriors, a place where a single poorly written poem could ruin your reputation forever. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you notice isn't a sight, but a feeling. The air itself has changed. You see people passing by. A merchant pulls a wooden cart, its wheels groaning under the weight of textiles. One of those court ladies turns to her friend and smiles. You catch a glimpse of something that jolts you. Her teeth are lacquered a deep uniform black, but beneath this veneer of extreme elegance and poetic obsession, the foundations of this world were cracking. You are a silent observer, a ghost from the future, watching a society teetering on the edge of a great transformation. The path out of the city quickly dissolves. What was once a wide, albeit muddy, thoroughfare narrows into a footpath, winding its way up into the forested hills. You're heading for a place called Kōzan-ji, a temple nestled high in the mountains northwest of the capital. After what feels like an eternity of climbing, you see it? This temple was revitalized in the early 13th century by a monk named Myo Shunin. Myo was a fascinating and deeply intense figure, and here is a little insight into how seriously he took his spiritual quest, a truly niche piece of history for you. The temple complex itself is a collection of simple, elegant wooden halls scattered across the mountainside. You stand there for a moment, just breathing in the ancient air. You push open the shoshi screen, a sliding door made of thin, translucent washi paper stretched over a wooden lattice. It slides aside with a soft, papery whisper, and you step inside. His head is shaved, and he wears the simple, gray robes of a Buddhist monk. While their primary duty was, of course, religious study and practice, many monasteries, especially ones like Kōzan-ji that valued scholarship, became centers of art and literature. And what better disguise for sharp-witted social commentary than a cast of talking, behaving, and misbehaving animals. It was a clever loophole. While we imagine monks living a life of pious poverty, some temples, especially those with powerful patrons, became incredibly wealthy. They were major landowners, and some even had their own armies of warrior monks, or sai, to protect their interests. These weren't just a few guys with sticks. They were formidable fighting forces that could, then, with a flick of his wrist, tease another figure to the scene. A rabbit poised to challenge the frog. In humans, though this first and most famous scroll contains no humans at all, it is one of Japan's most precious national treasures, a cornerstone of its artistic heritage. A monkey, clearly in a position of authority, holds a branch as if it's a scepter. A fox and a rabbit carry a large wooden board laden with what looks like lotus leaves, perhaps to be used as plates. The narrative flows seamlessly. It was just this bizarre, charming sequence of events. It wasn't until much later that scholars began to see the clear satirical parallels to human society. But for the people of the 12th century, was it just a whimsical fantasy? Or was the satirical meaning obvious? He's created a world that is both utterly fantastical and deeply familiar. It's a mirror held up to the society just down the mountain, but a funhouse mirror that reflects everything back in a distorted, comical, and surprisingly insightful way. The most famous scene of all, the one that has made this scroll an icon of Japanese art, is just ahead. The monk gives the scroll another gentle pull, and the climax of the first act begins to reveal itself. Historians still debate this. Did the original audience immediately see the pompous monkey as a specific, overbearing aristocrat? Or was the humor more general, a gentle ribbing of human nature itself? The lack of text makes it impossible to know for sure, leaving the scroll open to endless interpretation. There are no panel-like divisions, like in modern comics. A fox, a rabbit, and a monkey are engaged in what looks like a heated archery contest. The artist has a genius for capturing personality. The rabbit is nimble and quick. The frog is boastful and athletic, and the monkey is often depicted as a slightly corrupt or bumbling authority figure. Each animal is anthropomorphized, meaning they act like humans, but they retain their essential animal nature. The frog still has its lanky limbs and webbed feet. The rabbit, its long ears. Blend of human behavior and animal form is the core of the scroll's comedic and satirical power. One scene blends into the next, guided by the movement of the characters. Character, looking or moving to the left, naturally draws your eye in that direction, pulling you along the story. But right now, it's not under glass in a museum. There are no captions, no dialogue bubbles, no explanations. The story is told entirely through the images. This was highly unusual for the narrative scrolls of the time. The bakemono, which usually combine text and pictures to tell a story, often a famous battle or a courtly romance. The silence of the Chōjū-giga is one of its great mysteries, and also one of its greatest strengths. It forces you, the viewer, to interpret the actions and emotions of the characters for yourself. It's a universal language of gesture and expression. It's fresh. The ink might even still be slightly damp. You are its very first audience. A competition is about to begin. The silent, sacred air of the temple is being filled with a scene of raucous, earthly fun. The story begins gently. Few monkeys and rabbits are bathing in a river, splashing each other playfully. Ada's skill is immediately apparent. With just a few energetic lines, he captures the splash of water, the wet fur of the animals, their joyful expressions. There's no background scenery, no trees, no mountains, no sky. This is a deliberate, artistic choice. It focuses all your attention on the characters and their actions, making them pop from the page. This technique, leaving the background blank, is called hakubyo, or white drawing, and it places immense importance on the quality of the line itself. You lean in closer, careful not to disturb him, eager to see what happens next on this incredible, unfolding ribbon of paper. The monk carefully places his brush down and takes the right edge of the paper scroll. With a slow, deliberate motion, he begins to unroll it for you. The paper is washi, a traditional Japanese paper made from the fibers of the gampi tree or Mitsumata shrub. It's thin, but incredibly strong and durable, with a warm, creamy color. The surface has a subtle texture that catches the ink beautifully as the scroll unfurls. A whole world comes to life, a silent, monochrome symphony of animal antics. And often did clash with samurai armies and even march on the capital to enforce their political demands. Can you imagine a fleet of monks laying siege to the city? It happened. Its deep entanglement in worldly affairs, in wealthland, and even military power was a major point of tension and hypocrisy, and it was certainly a rich target for satirists within the monastic community itself, who felt their institutions were losing their spiritual way. You're not mocking Lord Fujiwara for his arrogance and clumsiness. You're just drawing a clumsy, arrogant monkey. It was a known genre, but what this monk is doing is special. He's not just drawing a single, funny scene. Historians continue to debate whether the creators of these scrolls were professional court painters, moonlighting at the temple, or truly monks who developed this incredible artistic skill as part of their training. The fluidity of the lines suggests a hand that practiced calligraphy for thousands of hours, a skill common to monks. Yet, the sophisticated humor and narrative structure might hint at someone with a broader exposure to the secular world of courtly arts. He's creating a long, flowing narrative on a hand scroll in imikamono. The scroll is meant to be unrolled section by section, from right to left, revealing the story as you go. It's like a primitive comic strip or a silent film on paper. The techniques he's using are remarkable for their time. It's a sense of life, of movement in his brushstrokes that is simply astounding. The lines are not static. They are calligraphic, meaning the thickness and speed of the stroke convey energy and emotion. A quick, thin line might suggest rapid movement, while a heavier, deliberate stroke could show weight and power. Any resemblance is, of course, purely coincidental. Wink, wink. This allowed artists and writers to comment on the follies of their time with a degree of plausible deniability. Monks were among the most literate people in society. They were scribes, poets, scholars, and, as you're now seeing, artists. They copied sutras with breathtaking calligraphy, a meditative practice in itself. But that same skill with a brush could be used for other purposes, but there's a playful glint in his eye that seems at odds with the austere surroundings of Kōzan-ji. His name could be Toba, Seijei, or perhaps someone else entirely. We'll get to that mystery later. For now, just watch him work. His hand moves with a fluid, confident grace. He holds a fine-tipped brush of food, which he dips into a small black stone inkwell, a sazori, with a few swift, decisive strokes. A creature begins to appear on the long scroll of paper before him. It's not a deity, not a saint, not a scene from a sacred sutra. It's a frog, a very athletic-looking frog, standing on its hind legs. The air is warmer here, thick with the smell of old wood, ink, and burning lamp oil. The room is spare, almost stark. Tsutomi mats, woven from straw, cover the floor, their clean, grassy scent filling your nostrils. In the center of the room, a single monk sits hunched over a low wooden desk. He's not chanting or meditating. He's drawing. He's so engrossed in his work that he doesn't notice you, this silent phantom from the future. This is your first glimpse into the surprising double life of some Heian-era monks in a society where direct criticism of the powerful, the emperor, the court nobles, the rising warrior clans was unthinkable and incredibly dangerous. Satire became a vital outlet. Let's talk about a bizarre little detail of monastic life that you wouldn't expect. The specific type of drawing you're witnessing is called giga, which literally translates to playful pictures or comical drawings. This connection between calligraphy and drawing is fundamental to East Asian art. But what you're seeing here is a masterclass. The monk pauses, holding his brush midair. He dips it back into the ink, his brow furrowed in concentration. This, you realize, is it? This is the legendary Chōjū-giga, which translates to scrolls of frolicking animals. You follow the action from right to left, the traditional direction for reading Japanese texts and viewing scrolls. As you continue to unroll the scroll, the scenes become more complex and dynamic. You see a group of animals preparing for a feast. One of the most remarkable things about the scroll is its complete lack of text. Here's a little-known fact that adds to the scroll's mystique. For centuries, no one was quite sure what story it was telling. You see a deer delivering a gift to a monkey priest who receives it with an air of great solemnity. The monk watches your face as you take it all in, a slight smile playing on his lips. The scroll continues to unroll, and suddenly the energy shifts. The gentle playfulness of the earlier scenes erupts into a full-blown, dynamic spectacle. The artist uses a technique known as tetsugen-bio, or iron wire line, strong, unvarying lines that define the contours of the figures with incredible clarity and force. Yet, within these strong outlines, the sense of movement is palpable. The frog's taut muscles, the curve of its back, the way it plants its feet firmly on the ground, it all screams power and effort. The large, powerful frog could represent one of the dominant, established noble families, like the Fujiwara clan, who had controlled the court for centuries. The emphasis on dynamic action, expressive characters, storytelling through purely visual means sets the Chōjū-giga apart from other art of its time. Think about it. This was created centuries before the invention of photography or cinema, yet the artist managed to create a sense of cinematic flow. The scroll continues, and the mood is about to shift again. This is the scroll's satirical stinger, its most audacious moment. There are even other, later scrolls dedicated entirely to farting contests, where characters launch powerful gusts of wind at each other, knocking over screens and even blowing away cats. It sounds utterly bizarre, but this type of humor served a specific purpose: to humble the proud and bring everyone, regardless of rank, down to the same basic biological level. The artist's solution is single. Swirling, calligraphic line is brilliant. It's elegant and dynamic, turning a crude act into a moment of artistic flourish. Here, in this sacred space dedicated to enlightenment and spiritual purity, this monk has created an image of sublime ridiculousness. It's a reminder that even in the most pious of settings, a sense of humor, especially a cheeky and rebellious one, can thrive. It's a perfect, pungent punchline to the high drama of the sumo match. The scroll has shown you athletic prowess, and now it has shown you audacious contempt. But the story isn't over. The animal society has other, more formal, human rituals to mimic and mock. The monk unrolls the scroll further, and the scene shifts from the chaotic to the ceremonial. It conveys not just the act itself, but its force and trajectory. The monkey's reaction is equally masterful. Its entire body is contorted in disgust, its face a perfect mask of olfactory horror. With no words, the artist has told a complete and smelling story. No matter how elegant your poetry or how expensive your silk robes, you are still a physical body with undignified functions. Alas, the great equalizer in the rigid, hierarchical society of Heian, Japan, where etiquette was everything. This was the ultimate act of disrespect. Farting in someone's face, especially someone of a different group, was a profound insult, a gesture of absolute contempt. After soundly defeating the rabbits in a contest of strength, the frogs are now adding insult to injury with a display of biological warfare. It's a moment of lowbrow, earthy humor that completely punctures any sense of decorum. The high-energy action of the sumo match will soon give way to something even more surprising. A moment of lowbrow, earthy humor that has become almost as famous as the wrestling match itself. You follow the monk's gesture as he unrolls the next section, revealing the defeated rabbits and the victorious, and perhaps slightly arrogant frogs. In the scroll, monkeys are often depicted in positions of authority as priests or officials. Or is it a more timeless commentary on the eternal struggle between the powerful and the powerless, the arrogant and the defiant? The beauty of the scroll is that it supports both readings. A fart is both a specific, sharp insult and a universal symbol of rebellion. So, when the frog farts at the monkey, it can be read as the common folk showing their utter disdain for a corrupt or foolish authority figure. It's a peasant's revolt in miniature, a symbolic blast against the establishment. The artist is using the most undignified act imaginable to make a very serious point about power and disrespect. The victorious frogs are puffed up with pride, swaggering away from the sumo ring. The dejected rabbits are tending to their fallen champion, but your eye is drawn to one frog in particular. He's standing apart from the others, his back turned to a dismayed-looking monkey. The frog is bent over, and from its rear end, the artist has drawn a powerful puff of air, depicted with a single, elegant, looping line. The monkey, caught in the blast, recoils, holding its nose and waving a hand in front of its face. Unrolling the scroll is like watching a film play out, frame by frame, in your hands. The smaller, scrappier rabbit, on the other hand, might symbolize one of the up-and-coming warrior clans who are beginning to challenge the old guard's authority. In this reading, the scene isn't just funny, it's a commentary on the shifting power dynamics of the time. The old aristocracy might seem powerful now, but the new forces are nimble and resilient. Of course, this is just one interpretation and a great debate among art historians is whether the scroll is a specific political allegory or a more general social satire. The rabbit's airborne arc is perfectly captured, creating a visual trajectory that your eye instinctively follows. You can almost hear the thump as it's about to land. It's behind the triumphant frogs. Another frog is holding a small stick, acting as a kind of referee or hype man. He's leaning forward, completely invested in the action. It's these tiny, character-filled details that make the scroll feel so alive. Every animal has a role, a personality, a reaction. It's not just a collection of drawings, it's a community. Before you is the single most famous image from the Chōjū-giga, the great sumo match. Their excitement is infectious. A group of frogs on the right leap and croak in celebration, their mouths wide open in what can only be described as triumphant shouts. On the left, a group of rabbits looks on in dismay, their long ears drooping. One rabbit even tumbles over backward in shock. The artist uses these background characters to amplify the drama of the main event, creating a complete and lively scene. It's a technique modern animators and filmmakers still use. Two reaction shots to heighten the emotional impact of an action. Kaso, muscular frog, has grappled a much smaller rabbit. In the Heian period, it was also a popular form of entertainment at the imperial court. The nobles would gather to watch matches between formidable professional wrestlers. Depicting a frog and a rabbit in a sumo match wasn't just a random funny idea. It was a direct parody of a well-known, high-status human activity. The audience would have immediately recognized the reference. Can you imagine a stuffy court noble, used to watching serious, ritualized sumo, seeing this ridiculous scene? It would have been hilarious. As the frog, leaning back with all its might, is in the middle of a spectacular throw. The rabbit is airborne, its body twisted in a comical expression of shock and helplessness, limbs flailing. It's a moment of pure, unadulterated action, frozen in time by the artist's brush. This is more than just a funny picture. It's a masterclass in conveying motion. Look closely at the lines around the central match. A crowd of other animals has gathered, cheering and shouting. Sumo wrestling itself was, and still is, a hugely important part of Japanese culture, deeply tied to Shinto rituals for ensuring a good harvest. But here is a quirky detail you might not know. Some scholars believe this scene has a deeper, more specific political meaning. The artistic techniques on display were revolutionary. The way the artist suggests movement and sequence without using panels would become a foundational element of what we now call manga. The monk, seeing your fascination with the sumo match, points to a small detail you might have missed. The frog has won this round, clearly and decisively. The rabbits are dejected. But the story isn't over. Yes, you are looking at it. A farting frog. This isn't just a bit of random, silly humor. This scene might seem juvenile to us, but it taps into a surprisingly robust tradition of scatological humor in Japanese art and folklore. Think about who the target of this particular joke might be. Art historians, naturally, have long debated the precise meaning of this gassy assault. This scene also highlights the artist's genius for visual language. How do you draw a fart? It's invisible, okay? As you stand there, a ghost in a 12th century temple, you can't help but smile, leaving the triumphant frog and the disgusted monkey behind. The narrative scroll leads you onward. The next major scene is a stark contrast to the boisterous energy of the sumo match and its aftermath. The mood becomes somber, a bit more formal, but no less satirical. You are now witness to a Buddhist memorial service, a funeral procession being conducted entirely by animals. At the head of the scene is a monkey, dressed in the elaborate robes of a high-ranking Buddhist priest. In a real ceremony, this would be a sacred Buddhist text. But if you could look closer at the scroll in the monkey's hands, you'd see it's blank. The artist didn't even bother to put fake writing on it. Hey, this could be a subtle but devastating critique. Okay, it might suggest that the words being spoken are empty, meaningless ritual, devoid of true spiritual substance. The priest is just putting on a show. The attribution was convenient and satisfying for hundreds of years. If you ask anyone who drew the Chōjū-giga, they would have answered with confidence. Toba, Seijei, modern art historians, armed with powerful tools of stylistic analysis. And it's a question that has sparked one of the longest-running debates in Japanese art history. It was likely the work of multiple artists working at different times over a period of about a century. A niche but crucial piece of evidence lies in the subtle differences in the brushwork. This comes down to a common practice in art history known as attribution by fame. The leading theory is that it was an anonymous, brilliantly talented painter monk, or a group of them, living and working at or near Kōzan-ji in the mid-12th century. They were clearly familiar with both courtly life and Buddhist traditions, and they possessed a revolutionary artistic vision, but their names are lost to time. In a way, this anonymity adds to the scroll's power. It becomes the product of an entire era, a voice of its time, rather than the statement of a single man. The monk before you might not be Toba-seiji, but he is the embodiment of a hidden, playful spirit that existed within the solemn walls of the temple. The true identity of the artist is a secret the scroll has kept for 850 years, and it may never give it up. When a brilliant but anonymous work of art surfaces, there's a natural human tendency to assign it to a known master of the same period. It gives the work a pedigree, a place in the canon. Toba-seiji was the most famous painter monk of his era, known for humor, so his name was attached to the most famous humorous scroll. It was a good story, and for a long time, no one questioned it. An expert can look at the way a line is drawn, its speed, its pressure, the way it tapers at the end and identify the hand of a specific artist, almost like a signature. When they analyze the 4 scrolls that make up the complete Chōjū-giga, they find distinct differences in style. The fluid, masterful lines of the first scroll are quite different from the stiffer, less dynamic drawings in the later scrolls. There is no signature, no colophon, no diary entry that says, "Had a bit of fun today, drawing a farting frog." The entire case is circumstantial. Art historians have become detectives, examining every brushstroke for clues, have looked much closer, and they've started to poke holes in this neat and tidy story. The first problem is the timeline. The first, most famous scroll, the one with the sumo match and the farting frogs, now dated to the mid-12th century. Perhaps it was a master and his apprentice, or a collaborative project within the Kōzan-ji temple workshop. This idea of a workshop, rather than a lone genius, is gaining traction. This would explain the consistency of the theme, but the variation in execution. It's likely around 1150. Toba-seiji died in 1140. It's a simple, inconvenient fact. He was likely already dead when the masterpiece was created. The name became inextricably linked with the scroll. He's sitting on a raised platform in front of a lotus leaf altar, a sutra scroll open before him. Some believe the funeral represents a specific political event, like the death of a powerful clan's influence or the end of a political era. For example, it might be a commentary on the decline of the Fujiwara clan's power, with the whole court going through the motions of mourning their passing influence. Others argue it's a more general critique of the Buddhist establishment itself. As we discuss, some temples had become immensely wealthy and politically powerful, a fact that many devout monks found troubling. This scene could be an insider-esque jab at the perceived corruption and empty ritualism that had crept into his own world. His expression is one of deep, pious solemnity as he chants the sacred texts. The heavy, somber robes of the monkey priest are rendered with a few thick, deliberate strokes, conveying their weight and texture. The sorrowful posture of the mourners is captured with delicate, expressive lines. Even in parody, there is a deep understanding of the subject being parodied. The artist had to know exactly what a real Heian funeral looked like to be able to mock it so effectively. To his side, a fox, acting as an attendant, holds a ceremonial staff. You're seeing the 12th century equivalent of someone rolling their eyes at a stuffy, overly formal event. It's a timeless form of social commentary. As this mock solemn scene concludes, you get the sense that you've seen the full range of animal society, from their games to their most sacred rites. But now a question begins to form in your mind, a question that has puzzled people for centuries. Who is the genius behind this? Who is this monk with the steady hand and the wickedly sharp sense of humor? You look from the scroll back to the monk, 'cause the dim light from the oil lamp casts his face in shadow, making him seem anonymous, timeless. For centuries, tradition has given him a name, Toba Seijei, which means the Toba High Priest. His real name was Kukyu, a high-ranking, influential monk, an accomplished artist who lived from 1053 to 1140. He was the son of a nobleman and rose through the ranks of the Tendai school of Buddhism, eventually becoming the head of the prestigious Angeji temple. He was known for his paintings of Buddhist deities, but also, according to legend, for his humorous and whimsical sketches of animals. This isn't just any monkey. It's clearly meant to represent a specific, important figure, the chief mourner or officiating priest. In front of this monkey priest, a funeral procession unfolds. The deceased, however, is nowhere to be seen, which is a curious and much debated detail. Funerals in Heian, Japan were incredibly important social and religious events governed by strict rules of protocol. The rank of the deceased determined the scale of the ceremony, the number of mourners, and the type of offerings made. For the aristocracy, they were elaborate public affairs. By replacing the human participants with animals, the artist drains the ceremony of its solemnity and exposes its potential for hypocrisy. Is the monkey priest truly pious, or is he just playing a role? Are the mourners genuinely sad, or are they simply going through the motions as society demands? Perhaps the focus isn't on the dead, but on the living in their performance of grief. A wild boar, wearing a traveler's hat, carries a large branch of the sacred sakaki tree. It's a common element in Shinto and Buddhist rituals. Other animals follow, their heads bowed in expressions of sorrow. A frog holds a lily pad over its head like an umbrella, a touch of whimsical detail in an otherwise serious scene. The entire setup is a meticulous parody of human religious rites. Here's a fascinatingly niche detail about the scene. The central figure, the monkey priest, is reading from a sutra. The debate among scholars rages on. What exactly is being satirized here? You watch the procession, this strange mix of sacred and silly. The artist's brushwork remains impeccable. The scroll is a reflection of a society obsessed with ceremony, a world where the proper performance of a ritual was often more important than the genuine emotion behind it. For a long time, it just made sense. Who else but a brilliant, high-ranking monk with a known penchant for comical art could have created such a masterpiece? But as you watch the monk before you, a seed of doubt is planted. So, if not him, then who? This is where the real mystery begins, their conclusion. The Chōjū-giga was probably not drawn by a single person. Even within the first scroll, some scholars argue they can detect more than one artist at work. So why was it attributed to Tobaseiji for so long? The identity of the artist remains one of history's great unsolved puzzles. Your gaze drifts from the drawing to the tools laid out on the monk's low desk. They are simple, yet refined. The creation of a masterpiece like the Chōjū-giga wasn't just about artistic genius. It was also about the mastery of specific high-quality materials. Each element of paper, the ink, the brush, played a crucial role in the final result. Let's start with the surface itself, the washi paper. This isn't just any paper. The long, creamy white scroll is made from the inner bark of specific shrubs, most likely the gampi tree. It's an extension of the artist's hand and soul. Did the monks at Kōzan-ji make their own paper and ink, or were these high-end supplies gifted to the temple by a wealthy patron? The exceptional quality of the materials used for the first scroll suggests the latter. The elegant, poetry-obsessed court culture you glimpsed earlier was a thin, fragile veneer. Beneath it, a political earthquake was rumbling. For centuries, the Fujiwara clan had ruled Japan from behind the scenes, acting as regents and marrying their daughters to emperors, effectively controlling the throne. But their power was waning. These were not small chapels. They were vast, ancient complexes, the spiritual heart of the old capital. The old, refined aristocracy was being shoved aside by a blunt military force. The established Buddhist temples were being threatened and even destroyed. The scroll, with its world of animals behaving badly, suddenly makes a lot more sense. The sumo match between the big frog and the smaller rabbit could be a metaphor for the clash between the established Taira and the underdog Minamoto. The funeral scene could be a lament for the death of the old courtly world. The farting frog could be a symbol of the utter contempt people felt for the new, brutal order. The burning of these temples and the massacre of thousands of monks inside sent a shockwave of horror through the religious community. Is it a direct, panel-by-panel allegory of the Heian rebellion? Or is it a more general expression of the unease and absurdity of living in such a turbulent time? We can't know for sure. The chaos provides the emotional backdrop. The scroll is a pressure valve, a way to laugh at a world that had become frightening and unpredictable. For a monk up at Kōzan-ji, hearing news of this would have been devastating and terrifying. It was a clear sign that the old rules were gone. He lives in a world of profound spiritual contemplation, but he cannot ignore the smoke rising from the capital below. His playful drawings are a form of rebellion, a way of making sense of the madness, and turning the terrifying samurai and the bumbling nobles into ridiculous animals. He cuts them down to size. He reclaims a little bit of power and sanity in a world gone mad. The new warrior power was ruthless and would stop at nothing. A powerful noble, perhaps one who appreciated a good bit of satire, might have sponsored the project. Okay? In the capital, you had the Taira clan, who were sophisticated warriors that had successfully integrated themselves into the court. In the provinces, you had the Minamoto clan, who were seen as more rustic, straightforward warriors. These two powerful families were locked in a bitter rivalry, each vying for supremacy. The emperor and the old court aristocrats were becoming increasingly like pawns in their game. This would add another layer to the mystery, suggesting the scroll wasn't just a monk's private doodle, but a commissioned piece of art, albeit a very strange one. One day, you might be attending a refined poetry gathering. The next, the streets could be filled with armed samurai, their armor clanking as a power struggle erupts into open violence. This tension culminated in a series of short, brutal conflicts. The Heian Rebellion in 1156 and the Heiji Rebellion in 1160 were shocking to the established order. For the first time, disputes were settled, not by courtly maneuvering, but by open warfare, right in the streets of the capital. The Taira clan emerged victorious, executing many of their Minamoto rivals and establishing the first samurai-led government. The brush he is using is likely made from a variety of animal hairs, each chosen for its specific properties. The materials weren't just tools, they were partners in creation. The texture of the paper, the viscosity of the ink, the spring of the brush, they all informed the final line. The spirit of the artist flowed through these simple, natural materials and onto the page, creating something that was not just an image, but a living, breathing record of a moment of inspiration. The monk pauses in his work, and for a moment, the only sound is the gentle hiss of the oil lamp. The quiet solitude of this mountain temple feels like a separate universe, but the satire in the scroll, the anger, the humor didn't spring from a vacuum. To truly understand why someone felt the need to draw a farting frog mocking a monkey priest, you have to mentally step outside these temple walls and back down the mountain into the chaos of the capital. The soft, absorbent hair of a goat or sheep might form the inner core of the brush to hold the ink, while the springy, resilient hair of a weasel or rabbit would form the outer layer and the fine tip allowing for precise, controlled lines. The way these different hairs were combined was a closely guarded secret of the brush-making guilds. A good food could hold a generous amount of ink and still come to a razor-sharp point, allowing an artist to draw a long, flowing line that could vary from thick to thin in a single stroke, all with a subtle twist of the wrist. The process of making it was laborious and steeped in tradition. The bark was harvested, steamed, cleaned, and then painstakingly pounded by hand with wooden mallets to break down the fibers. The resulting pulp was mixed with water and a sticky, root-based formation aid in a large vat. Then, the papermaker would dip a bamboo screen into the slurry, lift it out with a practiced rhythmic motion, and let the water drain away, leaving a thin, perfect sheet of intertwined fibers. The strength of washi comes from these long, unbroken fibers, which is why the scroll has been able to survive for over 8 centuries without disintegrating. It's both delicate and incredibly resilient. Next, the ink. This isn't a bottle of liquid ink you buy at a store. It's sumi ink, which comes in the form of a solid stick. You're looking at a jet black, rectangular stick, an ink stick lying next to a heavy, dark stone slab with a small well at one end. This is the suzuri, or inkstone. To make the ink, the monk would pour a small amount of clean water into the well of the inkstone and then grind the ink stick against the stone in a slow, circular motion. This is a meditative, preparatory ritual in itself. The quality of the ink was paramount, and here's a wonderfully nerdy detail about what that ink stick actually is. High-quality sumi was made from the soot of burnt pine wood or vegetable oil mixed with animal glue, usually derived from cowhide or deer antlers, which acted as a binder. The mixture was then pressed into a mold and allowed to dry and harden for months or even years. The best ink sticks were said to improve with age, like fine wine, developing a deeper luster and more subtle tones. When the monk grinds the ink, he is in complete control of its consistency. A little more grinding makes it thick, deep black, perfect for strong outlines. A little more water creates a thinner, grayer wash used for shading or suggesting texture. Finally, there is the brush, the food. Historians still have questions about the logistics of these materials. Watching the monk's deliberate preparation, the grinding of the ink, the careful loading of the brush, realize that the act of drawing was a holistic process. The late Heian period, the mid-12th century, was anything but peaceful. Two new formidable forces were on the rise. The samurai clans. Imagine living in Heian during this time. Here's the specific, grim detail that illustrates the era's brutality during this conflict. The Taira clan, in their campaign to crush all opposition, marched on the ancient city of Nara and burned down two of its most sacred and powerful temples, Tada-ji and Kafuku-ji. It's in this climate of anxiety, violence, and radical social change that the Chōjū-giga was created. The world was being turned upside down. Of course, historians still debate how directly the scroll is tied to these specific events. You are watching the monk create not just art, but a document of his time. The monk carefully rolls up the finished section of the scroll, his movements practiced and respectful. What he is creating, this long, narrative ribbon of paper, belongs to a major and highly sophisticated Japanese art form, the imakimono, or narrative picture scroll. The Chōjū-giga wasn't an isolated anomaly. It was part of a rich and thriving tradition, which makes its unique qualities all the more remarkable. Instead, a small group of people would gather, and one person would unroll the scroll from right to left, a couple of feet at a time, revealing the story sequentially. The viewer would hold the rolled up portion in their left hand and unroll it with their right, while simultaneously rolling up the part they'd already seen. It completely breaks the number one rule of imakimono. It has no text. As we noted, this was a radical choice. The artist made a conscious decision to tell the story using only images. Why? This is another of the great unanswered questions that historians love to argue about. You're seeing a conscious and clever subversion of a major artistic tradition. The word itself, manhwa, was popularized by the famous ukiyo-e artist Kazushika Hakasai in the early 19th century. It features sequential art, telling a story frame by frame as you unroll the scroll. It uses clear, dynamic lines to convey movement and emotion, a key feature of manga. Some historians and artists champion the true giga as the true origin, seeing a direct, unbroken artistic lineage. Perhaps the best way to see it is this: the Chōjū-giga is unto the first manga in the way that the Wright Flyer is the first airplane. It's more like the myth of Icarus. It's not a direct technological ancestor, but it contains the essential the dream of capturing life and movement and story in a series of still images. They view Tezuka and others as innovators within a tradition that stretches back centuries. Whether you call him a painter, a satirist, or the world's first manga artist, one thing is certain: he was a pioneer. He was pushing the boundaries of visual storytelling, and in his playful ink lines, he planted the seeds of an art form that would one day conquer the world. The debate is academic, but the legacy is undeniable. But there's another piece of this puzzle you don't know yet. This famous scroll is only part one of the story. Others see this as a form of cultural nationalism, an attempt to claim a purely Japanese origin for manga by downplaying the significant influence of Western art forms. They argue that the connection is spiritual, not direct, and that calling the scroll manga is an anachronism, like calling a horse-drawn chariot the first car. The anthropomorphized animals with exaggerated expressions are certainly ancestors of the expressive characters we see in manga and anime today. And, as a bit of niche trivia for you, some art historians point to specific techniques in the scroll as direct precursors to manga conventions. For instance, the swirling lines behind a running character to indicate speed are essentially primitive speed lines. The rabbit tumbling backward in shock at the sumo match is a perfect example of the kind of exaggerated, comedic reaction shot that is a staple of modern manga. He used it to describe his collections of whimsical or impromptu sketches hakus, a manga. But in its modern sense, manga refers to a specific form of Japanese comic book art, characterized by things like paneling, speech bubbles, speed lines to show motion, and a distinct visual grammar. He took the higher format of the imakamono, usually reserved for epic romances in solemn religious tales, and used it to tell a silly, satirical story about animals. And by breaking the rules and removing the text, he accidentally created something that feels incredibly modern: a silent comic. A story told with a universal visual language that needs no translation, even 850 years later. It lacks key features that define modern manga, most notably panels to break up the action and word balloons to convey dialogue. The storytelling is continuous, flowing across the scroll rather than being contained in boxes. Many scholars, therefore, argue that while the Chōjū-giga is an important ancestor, it's more of a proto-manga. They contend that modern manga truly began much later, evolving from a mixture of traditional Japanese art, Western political cartoons in the 19th century, and the massive influence of post-World War II artists like the legendary Osamu Tezuka, often called the god of manga. You're watching this monk create his masterpiece, and the thought is unavoidable. This looks a lot like manga. The flowing action, the expressive characters, the storytelling in sequential images, it feels so familiar. This has led many to call the Chōjū-giga the first manga. It's a catchy and romantic title, but is it accurate? you've stumbled into one of the most heated debates in the history of Japanese pop culture. Tease. This creates a moving window of action, a very deliberate pacing that was controlled by the viewer. The moment they saw the frog and rabbit in the sumo pose, they got the joke. No caption needed. Another, more tantalizing theory is that the subject matter was just too sensitive to write down. Directly criticizing nobles or powerful warrior clans in writing would have been treasonous. By keeping it purely visual, the artist maintained a degree of plausible deniability. I didn't say that monkey was Lord Tyra. He could argue, I just drew a monkey. You're the one seeing a resemblance. It was a shared experience, with people pointing out details, reading the text aloud, and discussing the story as it unfolded. He couldn't rely on a narrator to explain the action or the passage of time. He had to invent purely visual storytelling techniques. Hey, use the continuous flow of the scroll to create a sense of movement and time. Hey, he used repeated characters to create a consistent cast. He used a gesture and facial expression to convey emotion. In doing so, he stumbled upon many of the core principles of sequential art, the very language that would, centuries later, define comics and manga. Imakamono were the luxury entertainment of the Heian and Kamakura periods. Think of them as the era's equivalent of a deluxe box set of a prestige TV show. They were typically produced for wealthy patrons, the imperial family, high-ranking aristocrats, or powerful temples. These scrolls told all kinds of stories. The Genji scroll, for example, would have a passage of beautiful calligraphy describing Prince Genji's emotional turmoil, followed by a full-color painting showing him looking wistfully out a window. Some illustrated classic works of literature, like the famous tale of Genji Scroll, which brought the world of its courtly romances to life with rich colors and emotionally charged scenes. Others depicted the founding legends of temples, historical events like battles and rebellions, or the biographies of famous monks. Viewing in a kimono was an intimate and social experience. This is a niche detail that's easy to forget in a museum. You wouldn't hang it on a wall. Most imakimono followed a standard format, a section of text describing the events, followed by a picture illustrating that text. This is the alternate text and picture method. And this is precisely why the Chōjū-giga is such a rebel. One theory is that the story was so well known and the satire so obvious to its contemporary audience that it simply did any explanation. By ditching the text, the artist of the Chōjū-giga had to innovate. So, when you look at the monk in his work, you're not just seeing a doodle. To answer the question, we first have to define what manga is. So, let's look at the evidence. The argument for the Chōjū-giga being the first manga is strong. However, the argument against it is also compelling. Modern manga is a mass-produced printed medium, while the Chōjū-giga is a unique, hand-painted luxury item. The debate over the first manga title is, frankly, still fierce. Ultimately, there might not be a single right answer. You look at the scroll, then at the intent face of the monk.
The monk gently places the scroll you've been watching, the one with the bathing monkeys, the sumo match, and the farting frog to the side. He then reaches for another set of scrolls, It is universally acclaimed as the masterpiece, the one with the most fluid lines, the most sophisticated humor, and the most dynamic action. Now, the monk unrolls the Atsukan, the second scroll. This one is a strange mix of the first two. This one is even rougher. It depicts humans in various satirical scenes, often mocking religious ceremonies and courtly games. For centuries, historians have been debating the relationship between the four scrolls. Were they intended to be a single, four-part work? Or were they separate, unrelated works by different artists from different time periods that were simply stored together? At Kōzan-ji, it shows that the first scroll was so powerful and influential that it spawned imitators. They are just ink on paper, fragile and vulnerable. This remoteness was its first line of defense, but no place in Japan was truly safe forever. Were they hidden away in a stone storehouse? Were they spirited away by a loyal monk who fled with them into the deeper mountains? There's no record. They simply survived. Without proper storage, paper mildews and disintegrates. Insects like silverfish can feast on the starches in the paper and glue. And light, especially sunlight, fades the ink and weakens the paper fibers. The scrolls survived because they were treated as precious objects. They were kept rolled up in custom-made Paulownia wood boxers, which helped regulate humidity, and were only brought out for viewing on special occasions in dimly lit rooms. This careful handling, a tradition passed down through generations of monks and curators, is as responsible for their survival as any dramatic escape from a fire. It's possible they were damaged, and parts of them were lost. Monks who aired them out on dry days, collectors who recognized their value, and scholars who painstakingly studied and preserved them. This ensures their protection with the best of modern conservation science. Today, the original scrolls are kept in the hyper-controlled environment of a national museum, and a high-quality replica is displayed at Kōzan-ji for visitors. You are among the last people to ever see them in their original sacred context, before they became museum pieces. Their 850-year journey through wars, fires, and the slow decay of time is over. They are safe now, their playful spirit preserved for all time. They are the unsung heroes of this story. The first scroll, for instance, ends very abruptly after the funeral scene. It doesn't feel like a proper conclusion, leading many to speculate that there was once more to the story. A final section that was lost to fire, water, or simple decay. The country was about to enter a long period of intense civil war. For a time, they were separated and fell into the hands of different collectors and even another temple, the Shinganin in Kyoto. Can you imagine the masterpiece being broken up, its parts scattered? It was only through the dedicated efforts of later patrons and the monks of Kōzan-ji that the scrolls were eventually tracked down, repurchased, and reunited at their original home. This period of separation is one reason why their history is so hard to trace. The most devastating of these for the capital was the Daiminin War in the late 15th century, a decade-long conflict that reduced much of Kyoto to a smoldering wasteland. Countless temples, palaces, and archives filled with irreplaceable art and literature were turned to ash. Kōzan-ji, being in the hills just outside the city, was caught in the crossfire and suffered significant damage. The fact that you are able to see them at all is nothing short of a miracle. Their journey from this monk-esque desk in the 12th century to their modern status as priceless national treasures is a story of incredible luck and perilous survival, a testament to the resilience of art in the face of history's destructive tides. but none of them quite managed to recapture the lightning in a bottle, the perfect fusion of calligraphic grace, narrative flow. You are looking at an original and its less famous sequels, a testament to how hard it is to replicate true genius. Now, how did this fragile ribbon of paper survive the next 800 years of history to even be here for you to see? And later bundled as a set because they all shared the theme of playful pictures. The drawings are sketchy, energetic, and almost cartoonishly simple. The second scroll, with its realistic animals, is stylistically similar and may come from the same period, perhaps serving as a model book or a different kind of project by a related artist. But the third and fourth scrolls, with their cruder lines and depictions of humans, are almost certainly from a later period, likely the early Kamakura era in the 13th century. It's possible that later artists saw the famous first scroll and were inspired to create their own satirical works in a similar vein, and over time, all four were collected by the temple. The humor is broad and direct, lacking the subtle wit of the first scroll. It feels like a quick, unpolished caricature. What we now call the third scroll was thought to be the second, and vice versa. It's a reminder that our understanding of historical artifacts is constantly evolving. The first half of the scroll returns to the world of misbehaving animals with frogs, and monkeys playing and causing trouble in scenes that feel like a slightly less brilliant imitation of the first scroll. But then, halfway through, something completely new appears. Humans. For the first time, you see people depicted in the same comical, exaggerated Giga style. They are playing games like Go and engaging in various antics. The line work here is again different, cruder, and less elegant than the first scroll. You assumed the story was over, but you were about to discover that what the world knows as the Chōjū-giga is actually a 4-part series, and the other 3 parts are surprisingly different. It's like watching your favorite movie and then finding out there are 3 sequels you never knew existed, and they were all directed by different people. The scroll you just saw is known to scholars as the Keikan, or first scroll. The difference is immediate and striking. The playful anthropomorphized animals are gone. Instead, this scroll is a stunningly realistic encyclopedic depiction of animals, both real and mythical. You see horses, oxen, hawks, chickens, and dogs, all drawn with incredible anatomical accuracy. Then, the scroll moves into the realm of the fantastic, showcasing mythical beasts like the Kirin and the legendary Chinese dragon. The brushwork is still skilled, but it's different, more precise, more descriptive, less calligraphically wild. It feels less like a story and more like a naturalist's sketchbook. There's no narrative, just a catalog of the animal kingdom. Next comes the Heian, the third scroll. Finally, the monk shows you the Teikan, the fourth scroll. So, what does this all mean? The existence of these 3 other, very different scrolls is the strongest evidence for the multiple artist theory. The current consensus leans toward the latter. The first scroll is a mid-12th century masterpiece. This is a fantastic niche fact. For a long time, the order of the scrolls was actually mixed up. The existence of these other scrolls doesn't diminish the genius of the first one. It enhances it. You look at the 4 scrolls laid out in the quiet temple room. For its first few centuries, the scroll was likely kept safe within the walls of Kōzan-ji temple, a secluded sanctuary far from the worst of the political turmoil. How the scrolls survived this period is a mystery that historians still puzzle over. Here, as a specific and little-known chapter in the scroll's history. At some point after this period of chaos, the scrolls actually left Kōzan-ji beyond the flames of war, there were the natural enemies of paper: humidity, insects, and light. Japan's humid climate is brutal on old documents. The story of the scroll's survival is the story of countless anonymous guardians over the centuries. Finally, in the modern era, the Japanese government officially designated the scrolls as a national treasure, the highest possible ranking for a cultural artifact.
The monk finishes rolling the last scroll. The room is quiet again. The story he has drawn is complete. His work is done. But the journey of the farting frog and his friends is just beginning. Its influence is a direct line that connects this 12th century monk to the global phenomenon of anime and manga. The core principles you saw him pioneer: dynamic and expressive line work, sequential storytelling, anthropomorphic characters, and a blend of humor and social commentary became the foundational DNA of Japanese visual narrative. Legendary animators like Isao Takahata, co-founder of Studio Ghibli, have explicitly cited the Chōjū-giga as a source of inspiration, particularly for its ability to convey such lively, realistic motion with just a few brushstrokes. In turning these animals into cute characters, have we forgotten that they were originally tools of biting satire? For the 12th century viewer, it was a sharp satire. For you, the modern viewer, it is both a priceless historical document and a source of pure, timeless visual delight. The farting frog is now more often seen as a funny, silly character rather than a symbol of profound disrespect for authority. Some would argue that this is a shame, that the commercialization has sanitized the scroll and stripped it of its rebellious power. The mountain temple of Kōzan-ji fades, its solid wooden beams becoming transparent, mingling with the cool night air. The sounds of the story, the splash of water, the grunts of the sumo wrestlers, the rustle of silk, ropes are all fading, replaced now by the soft, rhythmic hum of the fan in your room or the quiet stillness of your own home. The parade of animals continues its silent march, but they are moving slower now, their boisterous energy mellowing into a gentle, dreamlike procession. The farting frog gives one last comical puff, but it makes no sound, just a soft swirl in the haze of your subconscious. The rabbit, airborne forever, now floats gently, like a seed on the wind. They are leading you away from the waking world, guiding you down a long, quiet path, deeper and deeper into a peaceful, welcome rest. The story is over. The journey is complete. Let the quiet settle around you now. The monk, his face a mask of quiet concentration, looks up one last time, gives a slight, knowing smile, and then he too dissolves into the peaceful darkness. Others might say this is the ultimate triumph of the art, that it is so universally charming, artistically brilliant, that it can transcend its original context and be loved by new generations for entirely different reasons. When you watch a Ghibli character run or jump with expressive energy, you are seeing the ghost of that airborne rabbit from the sumo match. You've seen the scroll's creation, explored its mysteries, and followed its perilous journey through history. He blows out the lamp, plunging the room into near total darkness. The only light, now the pale glow of the moon through the paper screen. The images from the scroll the bathing monkeys, the wrestling frog, the solemn funeral, the cheeky fartar, burned into your memory. They are no longer just ink on paper. They are alive. They are the mischievous, enduring spirit of a long-ago artist. A silent whisper of laughter echoing across 8.5 centuries. You can find them on everything from t-shirts and coffee mugs to stationery and smartphone cases. For a few hundred yen, you can get a tiny, perfectly sculpted figurine of the farting frog, or the monkey priest, or the rabbits and frogs from the sumo scene. A piece of rebellious 12th century satire has been miniaturized and turned into a collectible plastic toy. They have been used in advertising campaigns and as official mascots for cultural events. There's a delicious irony in this. A work of art that was created as a sharp, anonymous critique of the establishment has now been fully embraced by it, transformed into a cute and marketable piece of national heritage. Okay, now you get to see its final and perhaps most surprising chapter, its enduring legacy in the 21st century. The spirit of the Chōjū-giga is everywhere in modern Japan, often in places you wouldn't expect. The characters themselves have become pop culture icons. The wrestling frog and the fleeing rabbit are no longer just satirical figures. They are beloved mascots. Here's a wonderfully specific example of its modern life. In Japan, you can buy Chōjū-giga-themed gashapon, the little toys that come in capsule vending machines. This modern fame forces us to ask one last question, a debate that continues today. Has the scroll's true meaning been lost in its popularity? Okay, perhaps the truth is that the scroll has always operated on these two levels. Atia, the monk, has finished his work for the night. The images from the scroll begin to soften at the edges now, a gentle blurring as the crisp lines of ink dissolve into the soft fabric of your growing drowsiness. You can feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, replaced by the light, papery feel of the ancient scroll unrolling in your mind.